Trump is no longer coming to help Nigerians, and before you doubt it,
certain narrative is currently being pushed to sabotage the effort President Donald Trump is making to stop the genocide happening in Nigeria. But the problem is, they're not telling you the whole truth. Recently, a popular Nigerian pastor, Femi Lazarus, claimed in a viral video that the United States once refused to sell arms to Nigeria under President Goodluck Jonathan. What he failed to tell his followers is when and under whom that actually happened. The U.S. arms blockade against Nigeria wasn't under Trump. It was under Barack Obama, the same administration that quietly supported the opposition party, APC, in its quest to unseat Jonathan's government in 2015. Let's start from there. By 2014, Nigeria was in the heat of war against Boko Haram. Churches were burning, schools were attacked, entire communities were being displaced in the northeast. President Jonathan's administration reached out to the U.S. for advanced weapon systems, drones, and surveillance aircraft. But Washington said no. They cited human rights concerns under the Leahy Law, which bans arms sales to foreign forces accused of abuses. But that wasn't the full story. Behind closed doors, some of Nigeria's most powerful opposition figures were lobbying Washington to isolate Jonathan's government. Among them was Bola Ahmed Tinubu, then a key APC leader and now Nigeria's current president, along with several northern governors who traveled to the United States. They met with policymakers, think tanks, and advocacy groups, presenting a narrative that Jonathan's administration was corrupt, anti-Muslim, and unfit to lead. They urged the U.S. to withhold arms sales, claiming any weapons sent to Jonathan would be used to suppress the opposition. That lobbying worked. The Obama administration, already skeptical of Jonathan's growing independence from Western influence, quietly placed Nigeria on an informal blacklist. US and UK defense contractors were instructed to delay or deny sales. Even Israel backed off ongoing deals. What began as a security partnership turned into a calculated squeeze. A political move designed to weaken Jonathan ahead of the 2015 elections. When the blockade became unbearable and Nigerian soldiers began dying for lack of ammunition, Jonathan turned elsewhere. He reached out to South African mercenaries, STTEP, led by Eben Barlow, a team of battle-hardened veterans who had fought across Africa. Their mission was simple: reclaim territory from Boko Haram and train Nigeria's elite units. In just a few months, they achieved what years of conventional warfare had failed to deliver. Boko Haram began losing ground. Communities started returning home. The tide was finally turning. But that progress didn't last long, because as Jonathan's forces advanced, another battle was being fought behind the scenes. A political war waged from Washington, D.C. The U.S., under Obama, had quietly thrown its weight behind the All Progressives Congress, the APC, providing funding, campaign consulting, and even an American campaign manager who advised Buhari's team on strategy and messaging. It was no longer just Nigeria's election. It was an international project. Obama's administration, working through the Democratic Party's global networks, backed Buhari as the face of change and reform. APC became, in essence, a political creation of the Obama-era State Department, a party shaped, promoted, and supported by foreign interests determined to end Jonathan's rule. 12 northern governors were even invited to the U.S. under Obama's watch for a closed-door meeting. According to reports, they assured Washington of their commitment to removing Jonathan and promised that once Buhari was in power, relations would improve. Some of them even pleaded for continued arms restrictions so that the government's military efforts would collapse before the elections. And it worked exactly as planned. Jonathan lost the 2015 election. Buhari became president, and one of his very first acts was to terminate the contract with STTEP, the same mercenaries who were driving Boko Haram back. His government claimed Nigeria would handle its own security. Within months, Boko Haram regained lost territory. The group evolved more sophisticated, more brutal, and more funded. Meanwhile, Obama's administration celebrated Buhari's victory as a win for democracy. But it was Nigerians who paid the price. Tens of thousands were killed in renewed attacks. Thousands of soldiers died. Millions were displaced again. What the US and APC called change became a decade of endless bloodshed. That's not partnership, that's complicity. For years, APC leaders actively lobbied for US intervention against Jonathan, even calling for his arrest abroad over alleged corruption and human rights abuses. They painted him as weak and incapable of stopping the killings, while secretly ensuring that he lacked the tools to fight back. And that's the true origin of Nigeria's endless war on terror, a war deliberately prolonged for politics. But when Donald Trump entered the White House in 2017, things began to change. He didn't follow Obama's playbook. Trump reviewed the arms restrictions and approved the sale of 12 A-29 Super Tucano aircraft, precision attack planes that Jonathan had once requested but was denied. It was Trump who finally reversed those years of diplomatic sabotage. After reviewing intelligence briefings, evidence from faith leaders, aid groups, and US intelligence pointed to a pattern. Security failures were not merely incompetence. Powerful actors were looking away or enabling the violence. On that basis, Trump went further. He designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act, officially recognizing the persecution of Christians in Nigeria as a matter of global urgency and unlocking tools like targeted sanctions, export restrictions, and visa bans. But that changed again when Joe Biden took office. One of his earliest foreign policy decisions was to remove Nigeria from that same list, despite the fact that attacks on Christians had worsened and thousands of civilians were still being massacred across the Middle Belt and Kaduna. Under Biden, the US returned to a familiar pattern: silence, diplomacy, and excuses. Now, as Trump re-enters the global stage and speaks out again against the killings in Nigeria, the same networks that once sabotaged Jonathan are at work trying to discredit him. They twist facts, omit timelines, and use selective memory to manipulate public opinion. They repeat that America once refused to sell arms to Nigeria, without ever mentioning that it was Obama, their political ally, who orchestrated it, not Trump. They conveniently leave out that the arms blockade was part of a coordinated campaign by APC politicians, foreign lobbyists, and global actors who wanted regime change. They forget that while Jonathan was begging for weapons to protect Nigerians, members of his own country's opposition were in Washington, petitioning the White House to deny him those weapons. And when Trump finally broke that cycle and spoke against the genocide, the same people who benefited from Obama's policy began a new smear campaign, accusing him of interference, of racism, of using religion as a weapon. Some even said he wanted to turn Nigeria into Libya and steal our resources. But history doesn't lie. The Obama-Biden era's fingerprints are all over this history. They empowered a political structure that traded lives for power. They backed a regime that shut down mercenary success and replaced it with excuses. And now, as Trump returns to the global stage, determined to confront what others ignored, that same network is terrified. They know Trump's approach is different. He doesn't play diplomatic games. He calls things by their names. That's why every time he speaks, misinformation floods social media. Because if people remember what really happened, if they trace the timeline, the truth will expose too many lies. When APC leaders lobbied America to block weapons, they thought they were only hurting Jonathan, but they never knew it would come back to haunt them. Tens of thousands died because of those political calculations. The mercenaries who could have ended Boko Haram were expelled. The soldiers who could have fought harder were left underarmed, and the foreign allies who could have helped were misled by politicians chasing power. The tragedy is that the same playbook is being used again. Not against Jonathan this time, but against Trump, because Trump's intervention threatens to reopen wounds that many want buried. The Christian genocide in Nigeria is real. It's documented by global organizations, eyewitnesses, and even Nigeria's own former information minister, Lai Mohammed, who admitted in 2023 that Christians were being targeted. But instead of confronting the killers, the government targets those who speak out. They want to make you forget who called terrorists our brothers. They want to make you forget who removed Nigeria from the list of countries persecuting Christians. But the truth doesn't fade. Nigeria didn't fail because it lacked help. It failed because its leaders and their foreign partners didn't want the war to end. That's the truth behind the noise. And as more people begin to uncover it, no narrative, no influencer, and no government mouthpiece will be able to silence it.